Hey guys, I wanted to share this little video with you. I went sketching with Urban Sketches Johannesburg the other day, and we went to a cemetery, which I know sounds a bit odd. But yeah, there's this cemetery in an area called Braamfontein in Johannesburg, and it's really old. It's got loads of really old graves in it. So as you know, some of them are pretty cool, like some of the headstones and tombstones, angels and all sorts of things. So it's a pretty big place. Had a big wander around, but this is the scene that I have chosen to sketch. And I've got my toned Hahnemuhle watercolour sketchbook that I'm going to do it in. And I want to just do a sweeping vista across the 2 pages. That's what I've got in my head. Just going to totally cover both pages and see what I can fit in, really. So I saw this kind of structure, this kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, some kind of, it's not a gazebo, I don't know what it is, some kind of hut. And I thought that was a nice counterpoint to all the gravestones. I would have liked to have done just an up-close study of some of the angel statues and whatnot that are inside the cemetery, but you know, you've only just got so much time, and we kind of usually start around 9:30, 10 and sort of do a throwdown around 12, so we've only got a couple of hours. And as you guys probably know, these kinds of sketches do take a good long while, so I'm still in training myself as to learning how to sketch quickly, but I knew for this one I really wanted to do an immersive scene, and I wanted to do something bigger and more detailed. And actually this one took me an hour and a half. I think I could have gone further with it, but I was happy with what I did, and I called it around the hour and a half mark. So actually feel that that's quite quick for me. So in this video, rather than you just watching me do this, I actually wanted to share with you my top tips for urban sketching, things that I've learned, things that might help you out. Everyone sketches in a different way. There's no right or wrong, really. Everyone has their own different process. So yeah, I just want to share with you some of my tips and strategies on how to go about sketching something like this. So it took me a little while to pick my location. I didn't want to take too long over it, and it's a big, big cemetery. So, you know, I could be walking around for days trying to decide what to sketch. So I found this scene and I was like, okay, cool. So I commit to it. Only recently I've been using this wooden board underneath my sketchbook. To be honest with you, that's mainly for the ease of filming, to keep the book flat. But it is quite helpful actually, and you'll see later I actually balance my paints and all sorts on it. So it's just a normal, I don't even know what you'd call it, like, is it melamine? Is that the right word? I don't know, but it's thin, very thin, kind of like MDF-y kind of board. And I actually just found it in the stationery shop. Very cheap, but nice big board, about A3 size. So that helps to keep the sketchbook flat rather than balancing it on your knee. I'm using a mechanical pencil. I'm a big fan of using mechanical pencils for urban sketching. Don't need to worry about sharpening them. So, you know, if you haven't tried sketching with one of those, then I recommend it. They do come in different sizes and have different leads available, but I think this one is just 0.5 mil. And it's probably a B lead, although I'm not 100% sure. So with a scene like this, where I'm somewhat making up the perspective a little bit, not making it up, but I'm trying to squeeze more onto my flat page than I can otherwise see. I'm moving a few things in and like just curving it a little bit, not obviously, but I'm playing with it a little bit. It's not exactly what I'm seeing in front of me. And in order to do that, I do prefer to just map in some of the bigger shapes with the pencil. I don't really like to leave it to chance. I don't really want to go straight in with pen for a sketch like this. If I was doing something looser or a different subject matter, or just, yeah, it might be a different story. But for this particular scene, I definitely felt more comfortable mapping in the larger areas with pencil, just so I knew where everything was going to go and what I was going to fit on the page. Don't be afraid to do that. There's no problems with doing that. And now what I'm doing is I've got my pen. I've got a fine liner. It's a 0.2 So it's quite fine. It's a Pigma Micron, although that's irrelevant. I've got any old brand. It doesn't really make any difference to me. Although I do feel like the tip has worn out on this one, and I was a bit annoyed with myself that I'd forgot to put a new one in my bag, but we made it work. It was fine. So, I'm going around and really detailing everything out now. So I'm not drawing the entire thing in pencil and then copying, tracing over the top with my pen. I just get the major shapes in with the pencil so I know where everything sits. And then when I go in with the pen, that's when I really start drawing all the details. And, if you've got something wrong in your pencil or it's not quite right, this is where you can just sort of slightly adjust things. That would be my process for this kind of sketch. So I was reading about this cemetery, and it's got different sections in it for different religions, which I thought was pretty cool. So it's got a section for Dutch Reformed, for Church of England, Roman Catholic, Hindu, Muslim, and Jewish as well. So I didn't actually see the Muslim and Jewish graves, or Hindu, I don't think, but it does say on the internet that they've got their own separate entrances. So maybe I just didn't walk around enough, but this place is absolutely massive, and the entire group have agreed that it's definitely somewhere we could go back 2 or 3 more times. I only saw the crematorium right at the end when we went to do the throwdown, and it's such a beautiful building. So, I did want to do a scene with the graves and everything rather than an actual building as such, but next time I go back, I really want to sketch the crematorium. So you can see I'm very deliberately sketching in the stuff on the right-hand side of my page in pen first. And that's because I'm right-handed and I just wanted to get that page in without sort of getting my hand and arm across the pencil marks and maybe smudging things. So yeah, I just decided to start with the right-hand page. And now I can move on to the left-hand page. So I'm sure, as you can probably tell on the camera, this is a tone sketchbook, but it's not very, very dark or anything like that. It's just a light kind of tan color. And as mentioned, it's the Hahnemuhle, the A5 size. I really enjoy this sketchbook. It's really nice to draw big scenes across 2 pages. And I really do like that it's toned as well. And I thought it worked really well for this scene, whereas lots of like golden colors and stuff like that. And the kind of color of the paper sort of shined through a bit in places and just gave it that golden undertone, which I wouldn't have otherwise got on white paper. So I think it was a complete accident, really, but it did really work in this instance for this particular scene. So when you sit down to do something like this, it's really good to ask yourself, what is the focus of your scene? What is it that you really want to sketch? And for me, it was that I wanted to sketch that little hut, that pointy kind of pavilion-y kind of building, but I didn't want it to be the only main point of interest. So this grave that I'm sketching on the left here is also in the foreground. I've bent my scene round a bit so it actually fits in. And I kind of really liked that particular gravestone as well. I was looking for an angle where I could have like a really beautiful angel statue in front of me and do the pavilion in the same sketch. But unfortunately, there was just nothing around this particular scene that allowed me to do that. So this was my next best tombstone. That sounds so bad. This was my next best choice of tombstone to include in my picture. So where my thumb is there, that tombstone is quite ornate, so I wanted that to be in my foreground as well. And then all the other gravestones and the trees are dotted around just to kind of obviously tell the story and create the context and fill out the rest of the scene. But it's good to have a good idea of what the focus is in your sketch and what the main areas of interest are. So here you go. You can see now I've sort of balancing my paints on my board. I've got my pot of water and I've got my cloth over there. So this is actually quite handy board. I am very conscious of not to drop the water on the floor. So here I'm using my size 10 Escoda Reserva brush. This is a natural hair brush and it's one I've had for years and I really, really love it. It's really great for covering lots of areas of the page very quickly. It holds a lot of water, so it's a very nice brush. Here, this is something I've really struggled to do before or struggled to remember to do before, but I can't really see any sky in this scene. All I can see is trees. So actually what I'm doing is laying down a fairly light wash of green in the background, just as the base color of the scene. And then later on, I can add more tree textures and leaves over the top of it, but that light green will always be shining through. So it's a really good idea to kind of paint your background color first and paint it in a nice light color. So here we go. We've got a special over-the-shoulder shot here, courtesy of Duncan. And now you can see I'm going back in with other shades of green, just to sort of establish where the horizon line is, and there's some bushes back there. So you're like building up your layers, you know. So I wouldn't have necessarily put in that big wash of green before, especially when I was starting off, but that's one of my big tips, especially if you're, you know, in a park situation or something like this, is cover all those areas of a light green, and then all your other colors are going to layer nicely over the top of it, but you'll always have that light green poking through. So now I'm just putting in the green for the grass, although there's you would think it's autumn or something. There's loads of orange and brown leaves all over the floor as well. So I am going to try my best to try and get some of that in later on too. But for the moment, I just want to focus on getting this ground color in. Try and get all my biggest areas of color in first, just so the page is kind of somewhat covered. Again, for this style of sketch where I want it to be quite immersive and across the entire 2 pages. And I am dabbing in some paint, just wet and wet, just to kind of make it a bit more interesting textures. I mean, it is grass and stuff like that, foliage, so it's not one flat color. So it is good to like dab in other colors, wet and wet, and just to make your watercolors look really interesting. And I'm going in quite dark on these tree trunks. I really want them to be quite contrasty in relation to the sort of light foliage. But I am aware I want to create a bit of depth as well. So I'm trying to think about the trees that are more in the background and keeping them a bit lighter. And then those trees that are much further forward, I want them to be really dark, really, really dark. And again, that kind of shows a bit of depth. So the things in the front of the scene are more detailed and more vibrant, or a darker color almost, and things in the background are just fainter, less detailed, etc. So I do apologize for the sun on the page. I am doing my best to multitask in the sketch and make sure the camera's in the right place, and also make sure that you guys can see. I was sitting in sort of half shade, half sun, and so every now and again the sun kind of comes out and it's a bit bright on the page, but hopefully you guys can still see what I'm doing. I'm just going around right now. I've done all the tree trunks. I've just done the roof of the shelter thing there. I try and paint the things that are all the same color at the same time whilst I've got that color on my brush. A, it's just more convenient and it's faster, but B, it can really help you be more cohesive with your colors in your sketch. And that can just really help the sketch look a bit better. You know, if you can try and use the same kind of colors, same color mixes throughout, then it will just make everything look a bit more cohesive. So there's a bit of a weird kind of mint green color on this shelter. So I'm just mixing a specific blue that I have in my other set, a cobalt teal light, I think it is. With a tiny dab of yellow in it, just to try and make that kind of pastel-y green colour. And now I'm coming into the tombstones. I'm just going to sort of use the colours I feel. Some of them are a bit redder, some are a bit browner, some are a bit bluer, some are a bit purpler. So I'm just kind of amplifying that a little bit just to make it look a bit more interesting in terms of colour. And I'm really just looking at where the dark parts of the grave are and the light parts. So there's quite some quite strong lighting on the actual stones. And so I'm just looking for where the light bit is and the dark bit is. Other than that, I'm not going to get too much trickier than that. I'm just focusing on that for the minute. And then there's these amazing shadows all across the floor. So I'm trying out a bit of a light sort of indigo here just to see what happens there. It's always nerve-wracking painting across your sketch like that, not really knowing how it's going to come out. But this seems to be okay for now. I might come back later on and just sort of make it a little bit darker. And that's, also something to look out for. You can put one wash down, let it dry, see what it dries like. You can always come back over the top and make it darker. That's what the beauty of watercolors are. Like, you can just layer the colors on top of each other. And it's about 35 degrees whilst I'm sketching this. It's really hot. It's really dry climate as well. So my watercolors are just drying at a rate of knots. So it's quite hard to sort of charge in some colors or do some wet and wet stuff because everything's just drying so quickly. So at this stage, I'm thinking to myself, right, I've got the colors in. Now I just really want to amplify everything. I really want to get some stronger contrast in and just make it jump off the page a little more. So one of the ways to do that is to get a pen with a thicker line. So this is a zebra pen with a Fude nib. It's like a hard brush pen. And I'm putting in some smaller areas of black. I completely screwed up that checkerboard thing. I don't know, just lost my concentration and coloured in the wrong squares, but that's fine. And I'm putting like thicker lines around some parts of my main elements of the sketch. So like this tombstone in the front, I'm not outlining it completely, but I'm just putting some thicker lines where I feel like I want to. I'm trying to look at where the shadows are and also the hard edges where you might be able to put your hand behind the edge or walk behind that edge is generally where I try and put my thicker lines. And now I'm just using Faber-Castell pens as well, just to add in some quick shadows. Just find them nice to add in shadows and grey tones and things like that. And they layer over watercolour so much. I've talked about these pens to death, so do go and check out some of my other videos. I've got one that's called My Secret Weapons for Adding Contrast, and that's about these pens. So yeah, big fan of these. Do go check that video out. And they come in 3 warm and 3 cold. So on that more orangey gravestone, I used a warm grey, and on the bluer or the greyer gravestones, I'm using the cold greys. And I'm sort of jumping between tools. I'm jumping between the Faber-Castells and the fine liners just to kind of add in thicker lines here and there. This is where I'll add in some more textures here and there as well. So it's a very important part of the sketching process is once you've painted everything, in my opinion, is to come back in and restate a few bits and add in a few more details. Like here, I've got a Posca pen, just adding in some yellow dots for some flower heads there. Just little things like that can really make your sketch kind of come to life a bit more. And now I'm adding in some bits of darker green in the tree line, just to kind of bring that into life. And you can see how in the middle distance there, I haven't really drawn anything going on there, but because it's this light shade of green, your eye just infers that there's more foliage back there. So that's why that was like a really good tip, if you're painting a scene like this. And just getting some bushes back there as well, just to show where ground level is a bit. And it doesn't necessarily all completely look like that, but I'm really simplifying the background because, if you draw detail in every part of your sketch, the foreground, the midground, and the background, then it's just going to look really flat. And you have to exaggerate, you have to emphasize certain parts of your sketch. That's why the things in the foreground should have thicker lines and be super bold, and the things in the background should be really faint. And, it just really exaggerates things because we are drawing on a 2-dimensional surface and we're drawing a 3-dimensional scene. So it's like all these little tips and tricks we can use to make the scene more dimensional. So here I'm just using a Faber-Castell pen just to add in a few little marks in the vague shape of gravestones. And also I'm going in with another pen and just putting in some more tree trunks just in the background, just very lightly. And again, that really exaggerates that sense of depth. So I'm just adding a few finishing touches here and there, a few extra shadows and things. But that's pretty much it. And I was quite happy with how this sketch came out. I could sit and pick holes in it for sure. but I think for an on-location sketch and for an hour and a half, and you know, to get this kind of sweeping scene in, for me, I'm very, very happy with it personally. I hope that you have picked up some nice tips and tricks by watching me do this / hearing me talk about it. If you're interested, I have a full-length course called Sketchy Adventures that you can come and join if you want. You have total access to me. I take you through, it's all pre-recorded, but you can email me anytime and I can help you with any questions you have and give advice and feedback on your sketches. So we've got 3 modules in that course. I've got a new course coming out really soon, like literally in days. So hopefully you are on my newsletter and you will be the first to hear about that and you'll get a nice deal. And then also, you know, just all the other stuff like Patreon for more advanced stuff and ebooks and whatnot. You guys know, you can go and check out my links in the description below if you're interested in any of that stuff. But yeah, this is the finished fella here. Pretty happy with that effort. I wasn't feeling it too much. I was a little bit tired, to be honest with you. It was Sunday morning. I'd had a heavy weekend, very, very busy, but I'm really happy with how it came out. And here, if you're interested, we did our little throwdown and some of the sketches by the other members of Urban Sketches Johannesburg. Feel very honoured to be in a very talented group of people who produce such lovely sketches, and it's always a joy to hang out with them. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. Do check out all the stuff in the description below, and I will see you soon-ish for another video.